All right, we are live from the Ben Reinberg I Own It Studios in Laguna Beach, California today. And happy Tuesday, everyone. We just keep rolling downhill with incredible guests, and today is no different. Um, we have a gentleman who has an incredible rags to riches life story, and he'll share it with you. And he's an extremely impressive man when you get to hear his story, and adds a lot of value. You probably know him because you've probably seen him on TV, etc. Matt Higgins, welcome to the I Own It Show. It's great to see you, and thanks for joining us today.
All right, thanks for having me, Ben. It's great to be here.
So, we touched a little bit about your story, and let's kick things off. Share a little bit about your childhood and your career and your inspiration of where you're at today.
Yeah, I sorry for anyone who's heard the story before, but I'll keep it tight. I grew up in Queens, New York, and was grew up in a broken home and in extreme poverty. Those words, you lose their meaning. So just to provide a little color, what does that mean? Just hustling, selling flowers on street corners when I was 10, 11 years old. My mother was really smart, but progressively more disabled throughout my childhood. My dad was out of the picture, and then just everything was a combination of what's it going to take to put food on the table. Literally, we used to get by on blocks of government cheese from the USDA. Literally said, "Brought to you by the USDA." Back then, they used to subsidize farmers, and then these odd jobs, scraping gum under table at McDonald's, like every kind of hustler job. And my objectives were a few fold. One was to hide the fact that I was really poor. My kids tell me now that like they get wealth shame, not my kids, but just generally there's a desire to conceal your wealth. I'm like, are you kidding? I worked this hard only to hide it. But anyway, I don't identify by my wealth, but it's just kind of funny that back then it was all about concealing, or else you'd get the living crap beaten out of you. So that was objective number one. Two was to try to put food on the table, and three was to get out of my circumstances. So just to frame it, my entire childhood was a combination of just desperation and fighting to outrun the enemy, which was my mother slowly slipping away in the room next door.
Do you feel that background was enabled and propelled you to be who you are today? Because a lot of people, when you're handed a silver spoon, they don't have that drive. You walk into family offices and you see the 40, 50-year-old kid of the father who started the family office. They're not the same. They have shame and guilt written all over them. Do you feel
Yeah.
that your background provided that foundation? Like, if you look at the benefits of what happened to you, you could look back and say, this was a really good thing that happened to me. It showed me a lot of different values that are instilled in me today.
Yeah, I mean, look, there's no question. Well, let's break it down. I would never be where I am right now professionally, however you define it, but for the circumstances I was born into, because it unlocked the number one rule of the universe, which Warren Buffett talks about in a financial context, but is even more profound in a professional context, which is compounding. Because we can get into it, because I made this radical decision
Mm-hmm.
out of a crisis, which was to drop out of school at 16. I pulled forward my entire professional life by 2 years. And from a percentage basis, it's a massive percentage of acceleration. And so, yes, no way I'm running 2 NFL teams by the time I'm 40. I got nominated for a Pulitzer Prize before I was 25 and all these crazy accolades, whatever. That being said, I have a slightly different take. David Chang asked me, he's my partner, and he knows I teach at Harvard Business School. And he's always saying to me, when you see like a resume from a Harvard kid, do you just like toss that in because you're looking for the Matt Higgins? And I was like, absolutely not. Because I think, well, number one, somebody who was supposedly born on third base, it probably felt like first base to them, because for every action is an equal and opposite reaction. If you're born into fabulous wealth, well, maybe your dad never said, I loved you. Or maybe he made you feel inadequate your entire life because you couldn't live up to him. So I actually think everyone's third base probably feels like first base. And two, I think life is about not where you're born and where you end up. It's how much distance you cover. So it's still possible for somebody who's born into wealth in that family office, who decided to break the cycle of indulgence or Henry VIII culture that maybe, was around their whole family, and decide to use that money to deal with human rights, whatever. So I tend to want to acknowledge I wouldn't be here. Lastly, there's a lot of damage that comes from being born into dysfunction that took me, and still is taking me, many years to overcome. So I don't want to act like just because I have this hero narrative that it didn't create a lot of damage that I would wish on somebody else. The dysfunction, that's a nod to all the therapists out there who've helped me. So just being totally transparent.
So earlier this year, Matt, you published your bestseller book, Burn the Boats, and congratulations. Incredible book.
Thank you.
Describe for everyone, my audience that haven't read the book, the core tenets of your Burn the Boats philosophy and how you've been so effective for you in your life and other historical figures that you researched.
Yeah, I think I was given the blessing of my life was that I was put in this circumstances, and I feel like I hacked into the factory settings when I was very young. And what I mean by that is when I was going through this situation, and I was like, this isn't going to end well, probably around 7th grade, 8th grade. I had an epiphany born by observing my mother. My mother had no education, and I watched her when I was 9 years old go and get a GED. And with that GED, she was able to go to college. Now, I remember looking through the penny saver, the free newspaper at job listings, always trying to think, how am I going to get ahead? And I remember seeing the listings for college students only. And it was 2x what I could make in my measly job at McDonald's. And I was like, what is it about being a college student that enables you to 2x your income overnight? I have to be a college student. And I came up with this hack, which was I'm going to get my GED. And at the time, you could enroll in college if you did well enough, usually an oxymoron on the GED, doing great on a GED. But if I could do well enough, I could go to college early. And I was so excited about this epiphany. And I remember when I told my guidance counselors and everyone else, I was met with pure derision. You're going to be a loser and all the things that go into it. And so my Burn the Boats move actually was not about the fact that I dropped out of high school. And the word burn the boat simply means allowing yourself no option for retreat, right? Historically, we'll get into the genesis. But my Burn the Boats move was when I made the decision to drop out and was met with derision and conventional wisdom. I realized I need to self-sabotage because I don't have the strength to resist all this public pressure to stay the course. And the way to do that is to fail every single class. So I went from a kid who is relatively not gifted, but had done well to a kid who sat in the same room for 2 years with the kids with the beepers dealing drugs and everything like that, thinking the only way for me to go through with this is self-sabotage. That was my Burn the Boats moment. And I did. I went through with it. And then, the rest is history. And so the phrase burn the boats actually originates at the beginning of recorded history. It's attributed to Cortez, who is a sadistic monster and it was a genocidal maniac, not God you want to emulate. But interesting, in my research, I found that every society practically on earth has a fabled general that in one way or another, when their back was against the wall, they eliminated their retreat. Goes back to Sun Tzu in The Art of War. So I kept saying, why is it that military strategists know that when it's literally life or death, the answer isn't more options, which we're taught in Western society. The answer is no options. And as I started doing research for my book, because this phrase kept repeating, I realized, one, I've been living my life this way forever, that I would put myself in situations where I don't really have the answer, but I would allow my unrelenting and undying commitment to the goal to carry me forward and trust that I would just figure it out. And then two, what I found in science was interesting. It's a landmark study in 2014 where scientists set out to prove that backup plans are prudent. And what they found was the exact opposite, that they allowed two groups of college students, one group to contemplate a plan B while they were pursuing their goal, and they would get a Snickers bar or whatever the hell it was. And what they found was twofold. Merely contemplating plan B while you're pursuing plan A dramatically reduces the likelihood you'll be successful, but it also dramatically lessens your intrinsic motivation. And the reason why is something that will resonate with anyone out here who's listening who has a really hard goal. It's the pain of pursuit that propels you. And the reason why we conjure backup plans is to alleviate the discomfort of wanting something so bad. So the purpose of my book, and I'll stop here, is to appropriate this very bombastic, simplistic phrase. It's a Trojan horse. When you look at my book as pagan symbol of a boat burning, you think you're going to get a bombastic crypto bro all in. My book is the opposite. I want to appropriate this phrase on behalf of the risk adverse and the anxiety laden, and show people out there that most success happens in spite of the idiosyncrasies and the baggage we carry, and that you can be a risk taker. It's just you haven't been taught to reframe your relationship with risk, and instead you've developed an identity around hesitation.
And it's so well said. It's pushing forward. It's saying it's okay to fail, but if you fail, get back up and keep pushing forward. And that's what I love about Burn the Boats, because you basically, whether you burn a bridge or you burn a boat, you're not going back. You can only go forward. And
Yeah,
that's what life's about. Everyone in business, I don't care who you are, has failed. You
and I
know,
think people who reject this, and anybody listening, this is what the part I love, the cognitive dissonance. But wait. What, it's dangerous or it's reckless. And I admit in my book that I am the most paranoid risk taker you're ever going to meet. And I talk openly about imposter syndrome and anxiety. Again, to model what risk taking looks like when it doesn't come effortlessly. And the point is, you burn the boats for goals, not tactics. When people resist this, it's because they think that when you have a burn the boats mindset, it doesn't give you the optionality to iterate in your goal pursuit. And that's exactly the point. You burn the boat for the overall goal, not for a particular tactic. So you could iterate. And what I mean by that is my goal since I was that little kid was autonomy. I don't know how you feel, Ben, but like, man, I have been driven by wanting to call the shots. One, so that no one could hurt me, and
yeah.
two, so that I could help anybody I wanted to help. That's my goal. So when I had a business and it turned out that I was out of my mind, delusional, the business sucked, I would be the first to shoot that thing because it doesn't mean the death of my dream, because my goal is freedom and autonomy. And when I find founders or entrepreneurs, when they're stuck doing the same thing over and over again, they interpreted the wrong lesson from the universe. They believe that blind persistence is the key to success. And actually, that's a prophecy for failure. What you need to do is what Jeff Bezos says: be rigid in your vision and flexible in your execution. And my book is a degree of a blueprint about how do you reconcile all these kind of competing thoughts into one risk blueprint.
And I like that because you mentioned it's pivoting. It's knowing what your mission is, whether your company's mission is, and saying, okay, well, that's not working. I'm not going to give up my vision or mission, but I'm going to pivot to be able to get me to the end result and outcome. So looking at your career, Matt, from a distance, you've done many different things exceptionally well. Journalism, NFL executive, investor, Shark Tank personality. So I'm curious, I wanted to ask you this. How do you think about burning the boats when you start something new versus finding the next boat when your passions or life surprises take you in a new direction?
Yeah, I think you'll know this. I mean, Ben, it's all about being intentional, right? So I do a lot of self auditing. I'm always making sure that I'm being intentional. I think the worst thing can happen at the end of our journey, probably the biggest source of regret. I haven't gotten there yet, but I'm imagining it's all the parts in your life when you weren't intentional. So, one, I always try to be intentional. Two, I believe what's true for me is true for most, maybe not all, that the true joy of living is in the striving. It's the reason that anyone who just ran the New York City Marathon, today's Tuesday, you're probably depressed, if I had to guess. You're a little, you soothe yourself with cheeseburgers and French fries, but day two, you're depressed because you realized after you got the medal that what you craved was the training, was the pain of
Right.
pursuit. And so I believe that I am meant to cultivate a perpetual growth mindset, and so are all of us. And three, how do I stay focused on growth? It's to ask myself a simple question I borrowed from a land use context. We get to talk to you about this, right? It's from a zoning context, highest and best use, which I always love when I heard that phrase, right? And for those out there listening who are not in real estate or zoning, simply means making sure that every piece of land is put into production consistent with its environment, so that you don't have a piece of land that is now out of context from 200 years ago making butter or something like that in the middle of New York City. And so easiest way to think about it is a Tribeca warehouse that was a slaughterhouse 100 years ago and is now Taylor Swift's, hookup pad, whatever, or Leonardo DiCaprio's bachelor pad. And so my point being, I ask myself regularly every week, what's the highest and best use of Matt Higgins' time, energy, and resources today? Why is that question so important? Because we're iterative creatures and we are an amalgam of everything that's come before. When I find people who stopped progressing, it's because they were not auditing where they are at a moment in time and trying to remain in that perpetual pursuit. So I'll give you a concrete example. I was on Shark Tank, crazy heady experience, amazing experience. But actually, I was pretty sad when I finished it because it was very uncomfortable for me to go on that show. I don't know why. I am who I am. I talk about it in the book. I had imposter syndrome. Damon John gave me the best piece of advice. When I pulled him aside, he said, Matt, you belong here because you are here. And it ended up great. Loved being on it. But it felt like it was like the hardest thing I had ever done. And I couldn't imagine what would be more uncomfortable. And I got sad about it. And I was walking through Harvard University, checking out one of my restaurants. And I remembered a dream that I had forgotten and long discarded. And it was like, I also have an academic brain. I geek out on stuff. I love science and research. But I never got to compete at the best schools because I was taking care of my mom. And I went to a city school, great place, but it's not Harvard. But I always felt like not robbed, because I never feel like a victim, but I felt like I never got to showcase or prove that I could perform at the highest level. It didn't bother me. It just felt like an open, like sore, And then I realized what would be, I can't go back in time. I can't go be a student. It's too late now. But what would be even better? And it's, fulfilling my dream of being a teacher at Harvard Business School. So then the dream took hold again. And then I realized I've been on Shark Tank now. People will give you the time of day when they wouldn't have before because you're just another investor. Now at Shark Tank, it's very different. I was able to get an audience at Harvard, and I worked for a year of my life to create that course. And 5 years later, it's the leading course in America on direct-to-consumer businesses. Never would have done that if I wasn't rigorous about asking myself, what's the highest and best use of me today?
Oh, that's so fantastic. So what was your favorite part of writing this book, and how are you enjoying the book tour thus far?
I love it and I hate it. What I love about it is it brings meaning to a lot of the pain of my past. My mother ended up dying, right? I spent all this energy between 16 and 26 desperately trying to go from McDonald's. And then for those who don't know my story, I went from making $3.75 an hour to, by the time I was 26, the youngest press secretary in history, New York City history, making $100,000 a year. So I don't know what the CAGR of that is, but it's pretty damn good.
Oh, it's amazing.
It's pretty good. And yet, that morning, my mother asked me to stay home. She didn't feel good, and she never felt good. We literally had no money. I was sleeping on a chewed up mattress on the floor. She couldn't bathe herself anymore. I was bathing her. I hated my life. And I also knew within reach was the means for me to do my biblical obligation of taking care of her. But I resented being the hero. Nobody wants to be a caretaker. And I'm honest about that because I don't want to be, oh, you're such a good boy. Like, no, I wanted a life. And so that day was the day I was going to have my life. And she died at 10 o'clock in the morning. And so, I'm like, wow, her story is never redeemed. Her life is never redeemed. She died alone in her chair and was forgotten about by most. And so what the hell is the point? Me being able to take what I witnessed and then what I was able to do in response to it and try to distill it into a way to unlock people and unlock their potential brings meaning to her dying alone in that chair. And then now that I wrote it, and really, I didn't just write a book, I engineered an outcome. The outcome being you read it and you're like, oh shit, I could do that. And I tried to lower myself. So we're like, oh, there's that rich middle-aged white guy. Like, no. There's the guy who ate government cheese. You can connect with me somewhere. You can't fully discard my journey. My point in telling you this, Ben, is there's a lot of engineering, but you don't know if it's going to work. Every day I wake up from a DM from somebody in the world, a woman in Saudi Arabia I now talk to now who read the book and it moved her, a woman in Africa, people all over the world who have been able to cross the balkanized divide of our messed up world and who are like, oh, I see something in you and I see a little bit of me. And no bullshit. It is the most gratifying thing I've ever done in my life. I think it might be the most important thing I've done thus far, because to change the trajectory of one human being's life for 3 years worth of effort and $17 for a book, like, it is really kind of amazing. So I love it. With that being said, I feel responsibility to rep the book. Anybody who's an author out there knows what I'm talking about. If you don't rep your own book, your book dies. And so that's that pressure every day of like, if I go dark, the book goes dark. If the book goes dark, then there's somebody out there who I would have reached who I didn't get a chance to reach. I don't reach. And then why did I spend 3 years of my life? So it's a lot. I guess it's a lot. I'm being honest. I don't know why I'm sharing all this today, but it's a lot of pressure, but I love it.
Well, we're giving you the open space to be you, and that's what it's about. When I was 8 years old, Matt, I used to sell Marlboro Reds at a bar for cash. And what it allowed me to do was learn is that I need mentors to get to another level. So I always wanted my own business when I was in my 20s and I graduated from Indiana University. There was no playbook of how do you start a business. So I was CPA and I went to New York for the first time, and it was scary. I was a kid from Chicago and I was in an audit with a billionaire. I've told this story before, and he said, "You're not much of a CPA, Ben." I said, "What do you mean?" That was a big blow to me. I'm on audit and it's my first audit. He's like, "You're more of an entrepreneur." And that word wasn't really prevalent back in the early 90s.
True.
And it made me open my eyes. And what happened was I realized that I need mentors. I need people that can lead me, that have been there, done that, to get to other levels. And even today, I have incredible mentors from around the world that help me with all different growths, whether it's personal growth, business growth, leadership, you name it. You always continue to grow and evolve, especially with technology and how fast it's moving. And I wanted to ask you, do you have any important mentors as a kid that helped you see the bigger visions for yourself because of what your journey was and the process you had to go to become who you are today? And who have been some of your mentors during your professional life?
I love the way you are using the word mentor too, the way you're describing it, especially about that person in your life who recognized that you weren't a CPA, you were an entrepreneur. I talk about this in my book. It's such an important point. What you just hit on is that you have to really pay a lot of attention when people see something in you that you don't even fully see in yourself, because they have the benefit of pattern recognition that you don't. They are seeing a pattern play out inside of you, and they're spotting it, and then they're sharing it with you. So my entire early career was a similar phenomenon, and I liken it to I was running a relay race, and people were passing the baton from one to the next. I was the baton, and what happened is, in whatever context I was in, somebody would see something special about me, and they would see through the lack of polish or the circumstances, whatever it was, to realize that I had more to offer the world than I had been given. And it's not that I didn't suspect it about myself. It's that the confirmation, number one, when somebody sees it in your eye, and then two, giving you the opportunity changes everything. And so that started when I was like at McDonald's. I remember the owner of the McDonald's, they changed the labor laws back then. And I wasn't allowed to work as many hours, but he knew I needed it. And I was the best damn gum scraper that McDonald's had ever had. I would scrape underneath the gum and I turned it into a game. I was like, because you know what I realized? I was like, do the job that nobody else wants to do and do it so well that you render yourself indispensable, then leverage that job. Right. So what happened at that McDonald's, he saw that in me and he paid me half off the books. And he enabled me to become the manager of the party room. You know, I got to scrape chicken McNuggets out of crevices. But my point is, at every point in my career, there has been that one person who saw something in me and gave me that opportunity. And Mayor Giuliani, believe it or not, this is those out there. There was a version 1.0 of Giuliani, not the one you may know if you're young. There was the 1.0 that we all know, who was right place, right time, who oversaw the response to the worst terrorist attack in U.S. history. That man saw in me that it didn't matter that I was 26 years old. He knew that I could speak truth to power. I could be put in those positions, and I had great judgment. And so it's a long way of saying I could identify. And then in the back of my book, I put this in there, which I love. I listed all of them in sequence. The people who passed the baton, to thank them, even some who had died, because that was the common thread. They saw something and they gave me an opportunity. So back to anybody listening right now, we use a mentor. The word mentor is a little bit cliche. And I hate these cold messages. Will you be my mentor? I was like, I don't even know you. Like, are you effing kidding? Like, I'm not going to make emotional investment. What you want to look for is what Ben was talking about. The people who see in you and they have a little glimmer when they respond to you, being like, hey, that kid's good. You got something. Lean into those relationships. You don't need to go wide with your quote unquote mentors. You just need a few people who are going to entrust with you more than you technically deserve based upon your pedigree or your experience.
Yeah, it was something that I carved out as a young man in the business because I was always a principal, not a broker in commercial real estate. And I got into wine, Matt. It was something that allowed me to walk into a group of icons, send them a case of wine every quarter, which I could not afford at the time. I was in my young 20s. And what I realized was it allowed me to tap into knowledge and resources, which eventually these 10 group of 10 gentlemen who welcomed me in became naturally mentors. So for people out there, you can walk into situations and be aware of, you can develop knowledge and education just by a network of people that you get involved with. And you touched on something I wanted to ask you about. You were deeply involved in the New York City affairs in the aftermath of 9/11. Some of our listeners don't even understand how relevant 9/11 is and the impact which it had on the United States. It just had its 22nd anniversary. What was it like for you then working with Giuliani and on the rebuild? And how do you look back now, Matt? It's been 22 years later. And how do you look at it now?
Uh, Great question. Well, just for context, so that morning I was meeting Giuliani. It was election day, and New York was tired of the mayor. I mean, we get very tired of our politicians, and they were ready to be done. And so we were doing a photo op to vote that day. And obviously everything changed as I was driving to the photo op. We switched gears. So I was standing outside of the Trade Center about 2 to 3 blocks north of it, because the whole philosophy of the mayor in a crisis was proximity. You want to be as close as possible to the incident, and you want to use imagery to telegraph to people that things are going to be okay. The power of symbolism, which he always understood intuitively. So I have witnessed the most horrific things. I've been at the site of 2 plane crashes. I have been at shootings. I mean, horrendous. But it was his philosophy. Number one was that you want to be present. So before the first tower collapsed, I had been standing outside, and then the entire area had been evacuated, and I was like, just isn't safe. And I started pulling back, and that is when the tower collapsed. And I remembered meeting him in a firehouse. We lost all communication, and the fire commissioner at the time, Tommy Van Essen, was sitting on the floor. I remember all these images, his hand in his head, and he's crying. And then all around the firehouse, there's no gear. And then you're like realizing they're all there, and they all just died a few minutes ago. And then in the room, the mayor is on the phone with the vice president of the United States asking for air cover. And then you hear the jets flying over. So all this unrelenting stimuli within, a normal morning, beautiful day. And so I decided soon thereafter, I'm not going to leave here until I make my mark. I managed the communications for that attack. My job was to bring every prime minister and president to the site, because as we're seeing now, people tend to deny the magnitude of things that happen. I don't know why this happens throughout history, but our job was to show everyone. So I brought Vladimir Putin to the site, believe it or not. Every kind of prime minister. So that was the context. And then after it was over, I didn't want to leave. And so I became one of the first employees. Literally, it was a couple people, and we created a new federally funded agency to rebuild the site. So everything you see today is the product of the largest design competition in the history of the world. It's $2 billion of federal money to stabilize Lower Manhattan. Actually, one of the programs I was proudest of was a residential grant program that was designed to pay people to live there. Brilliant program. We just wasted $5 trillion of stimulus. So people are like, oh, you paid people. We didn't pay them that much money, and we got young people to move back to Lower Manhattan, stabilized it. So to summarize, when I look back at that, it was when you're doing something very hard on the bleeding edge, sometimes you have to surrender to the fact that no one's going to like you. No one's going to see your work except with the benefit of hindsight. So when we were doing it, we were actually very much at peace, knowing that we were mostly going to be vilified, because some people wanted it to be a 16-acre cemetery or memorial. Some people wanted to rebuild the towers as they were, as a big FU to Al-Qaeda. And other people wanted it to be a residential neighborhood. Starchitects wanted it to be their vision for grand buildings. And, there's just a lot of ego. I really feel like we made a lot of great decisions that were only obvious to hindsight. So my North Star during the time was saying, okay, we're not going to be understood. No one's going to get what we're doing here. But I want to be sure that whatever memorial we pick, when my little boy comes, who doesn't exist, I didn't have a kid at the time, but I was imagining my boy or my daughter, my child coming there and being able to grasp the enormity of the loss in a way that will stand the test of time. And I brought my kids there to the site when they were old enough to process. And they were like, wow, Daddy, all these people were here, And so long way of saying, I'm really proud of the work we did. We didn't get everything right, but I think we got a lot of it right.
So we'll switch gears. So you've been on Shark Tank for a few seasons now. And what's your favorite part about being a shark?
I love the competition because it's real. When you're sitting at home, it's really easy to do the math. You're like, oh, I would give 10% for this amount. When you're there, you're toggling between multiple different states. One, you're assessing, do I want to do the deal? 2, you're trying to make the entrepreneur believe you are the one to do the deal with. 3, you're thinking about how you're going to beat everybody at the same time. So there's a lot, like your mind is gear shifting. And these pitches only take between 30 and 45 minutes. On TV, you see 7 minutes, but it's pretty authentic. So honestly, it's the competition, because you think, oh, it's TV. No, it's not. It's a couple $100,000. Nobody wants to lose $200,000. Like, I don't care how rich you are. That is a number that is not a discretionary, disposable number for anybody, unless maybe you're Elon Musk. So if you're going on that show, you really care about it. The competition of being on that show is amazing.
What are the key things, Matt, you look for in a pitch on Shark Tank also with your investment company, RSC Ventures. What are you looking for?
Yeah, let's talk about Shark Tank because they're very different, right? But so Shark Tank, I do think, and again, it's hard when you're a guest shark. You're not getting that many reps. So I'm not saying I stick by this philosophy, but if I were on all the time, this would 100% be my philosophy. I'm looking for scalable and available. I'm looking for a product probably that is scalable to the widest possible number of people and available to the widest number of people when they see the show, because the Shark Tank effect is very real. But if you go on the show and you back a brick and mortar business that is in, one part of the country, what use is all those impressions if people see it and they can't consume it? So I'm always thinking consumer product. I'm thinking e-com, that is, and then that's on the product side, right? On the entrepreneur side, you don't have a ton of time. So you're looking for signals or tells, right? You're looking, for example, probably the most important one I'm looking for is conviction, not rigidity, but conviction. I hate when you see an entrepreneur go on that show and they, a Mark Cuban would be like, I hate your branding, or I think you should be doing something totally different. Like, cool, I'll change it all. Are you in? And it's like, that doesn't really make sense. Like, you spent all this time, as your dream, and now just because some random person on a TV set tells you they don't like whatever they don't like, you're changing your mind. So I'm looking for conviction, but not rigidity. I'm looking for not just I think know your numbers is kind of trite, obviously. I'm looking for the person who's willing to say they don't know. I think somebody who's willing to say they don't know some aspect of it under that kind of pressure is way more insightful than somebody who gets, the rudimentaries down, obviously, if you don't know that. So I'm looking for proxies for self-awareness, because, as you know, Ben, right, every business, the fate of a business is determined by the pivots that you make along the way. And a proxies for self-awareness telegraph that somebody is introspective enough to identify when things aren't going wrong. So I have a lot of, like, when I've been on before, I write them down so I'm aware of what I'm looking for, but I'm looking for a ton of tells, and we could do like an hour on this, but I'm looking for signals of all those various things because I only got 45 minutes.
Well, not only that, are you also looking at the personality of the person and saying, am I going to forget about the concept? Maybe the concept works and it's scalable, it checks the boxes. It's also looking at, is this person going to take it to the next level? Is this person going to be coachable? Is this person going to listen? Are you looking at those factors saying, okay, I like the concept, I'm going to compete with everyone else, but I'm not feeling it on this person.
Yeah.
They're not solution oriented. They don't hit my values. What's going through your head when you see something like that?
100%. I mean, I think the first thing your mind does, obviously, is you evaluate whether you like the product or the idea, but that doesn't take very long for anybody. Then the majority of your time is spent exactly what you just said. You're evaluating the person, whether you want to spend time with them. You're mostly evaluating, do they really have what it takes? And I think people fall broadly into a couple of categories, but one of the categories, which is an outright no to me, is when somebody is trying to enlist me on a rescue mission. And I would argue that, almost the majority, maybe the slight minority of people who go on are looking for a rescue mission. And they don't want to go the rest of the way. And they think merely by bringing a shark on, it's going to change your trajectory. And no one person changes the trajectory of a failing business. And so when I see those signals, like, oh, you think, one, you want me to do the work, which is a waste of time for me relative, because now you're going to create a huge opportunity cost. But two, you are wrong thinking that I alone am going to change the trajectory of your bad idea or bad business. So the sweet spot for me is somebody who has a ton of conviction, has a product that's scalable and available, and honestly would probably be successful without my intervention, but I can pour gasoline, right? That is amazing. If I'm like, and I think when I see the naive tell of being like, oh, you think I'm going to fix the fact that you don't have product market fit, or you don't have any traction, that you've been at it for 3 years? Like I don't care how dynamic Kevin O'Leary is, Mr. Wonderful. He can't do that.
Well, and it's true. It's with us, with investors. We don't allow every investor to come in our universe at Alliance and invest with us, because we want people that align with our values, which is transparency, integrity, consistency, and expertise. We want people that when we call capital, they're going to fund their proportionate share, whether it's a call fund or if it's a syndication. And people that understand what we do and look for that long-term relationship is important in what we do. And so knowing the person and understanding who they are is so critical to who you align yourself, because life's short.
Yeah.
You have a bad experience, whether the business is good or not. It's, your personal and business life mirror each other.
That's a danger when you get to where you've gotten to, because you willed yourself as a lone wolf.
Mhm.
I found, because I went through this evolution as an investor myself, you overemphasize your ability to, I'll fix it. You know what I mean? Oh, that's messed up, but I'll figure it out. Like, that doesn't scale very well. What scales a lot better is when you have a founder entrepreneur who makes their own interventions, who doesn't need you to pick up the phone. Like Mike, that's a third top executive you've lost in the last 3 months. Do you think it's them or it's you? The Mike, if he's self-aware, would be like, man, I can't retain talent. What is it about me or this place? So I'm always, again, I didn't start out this way because I thought, oh, I'll fix everything. I'll show how clever I am. I don't want to be clever anymore. I just want to be right. So now I look for people who over-index on self-awareness, and people say, okay, Matt, well, that's all gobbledygook. How do you identify whether somebody has self-awareness? My simple tactic, it's also authentic, but it happens to serve the purpose, is that I model what vulnerability looks like. I think I just wrote a book that models what vulnerability looks like by being honest about stuff. And the reason why that's important, you create space for somebody to safely share whatever it is that they are contending with. If you create space for somebody to share vulnerability because you've modeled it yourself, and that person doesn't reciprocate, they under-index for self-awareness. Because self-awareness would make you have enough EQ to be like, I should probably share too. He just said he sucked at that. It would probably be a good idea if I shared something. So again, we're getting really tactical, but to me, it's so self-awareness scales better than anything in management.
Well, it's so true. And one of the things we do at Alliance is we decided to do a playbook on all our employees and leadership team. And what that allows us to do, Matt, is allows us to understand what do people want currently in their life, their personal life, what they want in their career, and what they want in their future. And so when we did it, and we do it every quarter with our employees, is we realize that every employee wants health and wellness. So how to create a community, which we do at Alliance. And then we realize, what do people want for their career? And everyone wants mentoring and coaching. And that way you can input it into your universe or your company or your culture and provide that. It's interesting because all our employees want to learn about investments, Matt. Maybe we should bring you in to talk to them about it, because that's what we do as a company, is investments. And so it's ironic that they want to learn about investments, but there's a lot of
what propels that desire. Is it to get wealthy, or is it feeling like they don't know enough? Or
it's a great question. What I feel when we analyze everyone's playbook and we see like what energizes them, what it's really financial freedom. Like what you and I start off in our life is the freedom to have choices, the freedom to decide what a perfect day is and how to design it. And so what we've allowed people to do with our employees and leadership team is we said, we're going to help you design the life that you want and support it. And because we realize that the business and personal life interact with each other. And for years, especially with this remote workplace and the hybrid working, and everyone's working in a silo, and we have people all over the country, it's hard where people feel like, how do I become part of the Alliance community? How do I have my fingerprints on what we're doing? How do I believe in the company mission? And so we had to realize, how do we incorporate people's personal lives to get to know them and make sure we're energizing them and giving them work that energizes them. And so that's what we decided to do. It's been a wonderful tool for everyone out there that's looking to build a good community within their company, for all you entrepreneurs out there.
That's great advice. How does health and wellness manifest, specifically in terms of what you might provide somebody corporately? I'm curious.
Yeah, I mean, one of the things you could do is there's apps that companies provide where it's, we're going to pay for X percentage of the cost. Say it's $50 a month. We might pay for it all. We might pay for a portion of it. And this app might have hundreds and hundreds of health clubs around the country. So if we have staff that travel, they can go work out. They promote it. The other thing is we bring in people to talk about, what do you do? Okay, well, if you're going to go on a meeting, if Joe and Sue have a meeting and they don't need to be there at computers, go out and walk, put your headphones in, have your meeting while you're walking. There's different things you could do. We have functions where we have Friday lunches together, and we talk about what are you bringing, what are you eating. We might send a DoorDash and say, hey, here's some restaurants in your area to promote health. We do all different types of promoting. The other thing we do is we have one-on-ones with our leadership team, and they have one-on-ones with their staff. And we look at it and we say, okay, well, Matt, you told me you want to work out 5 days a week. Are you doing it? And you every week, you're checking the toggle, and you say, well, Ben, I only worked out 3 days a week. Okay, what was the challenge? Well, I went on a property tour. I went to go meet with this, resource we do business with. Okay. Or you might say to me, hey, Ben, I want to meditate 2 times a day like you do. What do you do? Okay, well, let me give you a resource. So we're constantly engaged with our team and our staff about health and wellness because that's what they want, and constantly giving them ideas. And what happens is in your playbook, Matt, is it allows you to hold people accountable, and for your people to hold themselves accountable, where you can review their playbook every week about what's going on in their lives. And that's how they change. And it's been a big impact.
Good for you. That's awesome.
So RSE, your company, invests in some very cool and non-traditional businesses. Do you have any fun stories you could share of how you came across some of these investment opportunities, like, for example, NASCAR and drone racing and reservation apps and dozens more across sports, media, and tech?
Yeah, well, Gary Vaynerchuk is actually an interesting story. Because again, I always think about where do we collect our insights? I call them proprietary insights, right?
Mm-hmm.
I think one of the disservices that Shark Tank does is that it perpetuates this myth that businesses are built on patents or inventions or products. And as you know, that's not the case. It's just about doing something slightly better than somebody else is doing it or has done it. It's these micro innovations that lead to massive businesses like Airbnb and Uber. And so I try to explain that in my book, but also I evaluate my own life. So when I was at the New York Jets, running the Jets, it's a great story. I was running the business team. I had everybody's dream job, right? So when you're running a sports business, it really means that you're running a sales operation for 3 revenue streams: suites, tickets, and sponsorship. That's it. Sounds great, glorified, but that's what you're doing. And so my team was like, there's this guy named Gary Vaynerchuk. And if those, most people watching this probably have heard of Gary, but he's, a sensation and he's going to buy the Jets. He said so. And I was like, no, he's not. He's a wine librarian. He does a YouTube video channel. He's like, no. But this guy is the guy. Like, can you help us close him? And this is what you do. I'm sure, Ben, you do this a lot. You end up finding yourself being the glorified closer. And so I go to meet with Gary at a bagel store at the time. And this is 2009. And, the first 10 minutes I'm hearing him talk, he sounds out of his mind, cursing every 2 seconds and bravado. But the second 20 minutes were eye-opening, in which he talked about his read on brand and content, and how because of the phone, because of this little device, 2009, this is still early, but that everybody is going to be both Comcast, HBO, and The Sopranos. They're basically going to be the cable company, the distributor, and the content creator, because the phone's going to enable all of us to do it. Incredibly prescient, right? And then Gary was like, so me and my little brother, AJ, who's still in college, we're going to create a firm that's going to enable companies to keep up with social media, because this is the early days Twitter. And I cut a deal with Gary at the time, like, this guy could help me be the one person in sports executive who totally gets it. And we're going to build a business. Gary goes ahead. I give him 8 Jets tickets. He helps transform the Jets into the most social savvy sports team in the country, not just like the NFL. And then we go forward, right? I go back when I partner with Steve Ross, saying, having a social media firm in your corner while we're doing all these other consumer deals could only be helpful. And I went back and I acquired 40% of the firm. It went from a bagel store and 8 Jets tickets to now the largest social media firm in the world. We'll do 300+ million in revenue this year. We have offices in Asia, all over. And so my message to anybody out there, meditate on where you could find proprietary insights, and they could end up being a $300 million business. My proprietary insight was like, this guy Gary is easy to dismiss because he curses every other word, but actually has incredible insights. And if he was properly supported, he could scale this thing into a massive firm. And it's one of my most successful, investments.
So one of the challenges I had as I started becoming successful is I have 3 kids, Matt. and it didn't come from money. And I had to grind to get to this point. And just like you had to grind and get creative and take risk. And you always want to do things for your kids that you never had. You want to give them that life. And it was always a fine line. And I always struggled of how do I deal with generation wealth that we've earned, but also send the right message and teach the right lessons. How do you think about burning the boats as it relates to your kids and the generational level of wealth you've earned?
Great question. I do think about it. Fortunately, I don't have to think about it that much because I feel like they came again in the factory settings with great values, and so I'm not going to act like I have to work really hard at it. But I do think there's a couple of family-wide principles that I perpetuate. One is reverence for work. We have a culture of work in this family, and that means reverence for the waiter, reverence for the person at 7-Eleven who's driving Uber, and it's constantly explaining work. And so all the kids have worked at a very young age. My stepson has been working in an ice cream parlor since he was 13, 14 years. So culture of work, because that's where the origin of respect. Second principle is a culture of hard things. Like everyone is doing something hard and uncomfortable in relation to their life. And that, so to me, as long as wealth isn't a corrosive presence because you're developing your own identity by your fancy car, the kids can pick that up when you derive worth as a parent based upon wealth. As long as that's not present, I do think you can eclipse the presence of wealth with a culture of reverence for hard work. And so as I'm talking to you and I'm thinking about each one of the kids are doing something really uniquely hard for them that they really value, and that becomes their identity more than wealth will ever become their identity. And then otherwise, it's a balance. I don't want everybody to be a little wealthy, rich snots, so it's but I don't know how you feel, Ben. Anybody can get wealthy, right? I don't value, I value, that book was hard. It's hard to teach at Harvard as a kid who came from nothing. It's I dismiss the wealth as a byproduct. I want to enjoy it, but I really do feel like that anybody can be wealthy, but can people accumulate hard things, what I mean, that are objectively hard to do? So
Yeah, and being uncomfortable is how you grow.
yeah.
And putting your kids in those positions is some of the best traits and ideas, and that culture you build is absolutely the best way, because then they understand when dad's not holding their hand, they can get through tough times and challenges and be solutionary oriented.
I do think one point I feel so strongly about this. I do find, because I've had friends who grew up where I grew up and some of them became wealthy. I find that they will attempt to prosthetically install hardship. I mean, they're going to manufacture hardship that mirrors the hardship they were in. I was like, that doesn't make any sense. Identify the hardship in your child's life and then give them the tools and the encouragement to overcome that. So that to me is such a small, important, nuanced point. But I think if you try the first way, to prosthetically install hardship, you're going to make your child feel subconsciously less than, because they're trying to mirror you, and it's not possible. It's like you're making it up. You're rich. You can't deny them a nice meal. I was like, but there's a hardship in your life, in your child's life. Maybe they have anxiety. Maybe they are not athletic, but they always aspire to being on the baseball team. There is a hardship that matters to them. And so I would caution anybody I got 4 kids have gone through this journey. My personal feeling is don't prosthetically manufacture or replicate your own hardship. Lean into the one that they find, and don't judge the fact that they find that thing hard. That's that difficulty is the opportunity to create self-possessed kids by being unconditional loving, but then making them go through the pain of overcoming it.
So, Matt, both the Jets and the Dolphins look likely to have some good years ahead of them. They're turning the corner compared to some of the poor seasons they've had. Who are you rooting for?
I mean, the Dolphins. I mean,
Dolphins.
no question. I mean, I obviously loved the Jets when I was there. I grew up around the Jets, but I became partners with Steve Ross and a team.
Mhm.
My partnership with Steve Ross changed my life. I've been around the Dolphins. I played a central role in transforming that organization from a team that couldn't fill stadiums, to I hired an amazing CEO named Tom Garfinkel, who's the best in sports, and he has run with it. I stepped back. But I love the Dolphins. They're my team. They will be forever. Doesn't mean I didn't love Rex Ryan in my years at the Jets. Oh, man, genius, if any Jets fans out there.
So, what are your predictions with the Dolphins this year? How are they going to end up, you feel?
Well, what's amazing about being around this business long enough, you know that you should never make predictions. So I'm not going to do that. I do think this coach is fantastic, and I think he's going to have a very long run with the team. Right now, obviously, we just lost, so that was unfortunate going all the way to Germany. But I don't know. This coach is special. Everyone always feels that, but I've been around the block a lot. I say that unreservedly, that this coach has a degree of magic. So I just think, but I don't know how we're going to end up this year. There's so many different times I was like, oh, we're going to, and then there's an injury, or you know how it goes. Every Jets fan knows how it goes.
For sure. For sure.
What's your team?
Well, I'm from Chicago. I mean, so obviously I've been when you're from Chicago, when you're born, you get a Bears jersey, and then that's your team, and you don't leave it. But I just saw the Bears Chargers play in Los Angeles, and I realize they have a lot of work to do. So they tend to let me down. So I'm actually a USC football fan. I've gotten into USC football, so that seems to be my team that I'm gravitating to, and go to all those games. But Matt, you support a number of worthy causes. Share with everyone some of the organizations you're involved with, and how can others support some of the things that you support?
Yeah, I'll just zero down on the things that matter most. I mean, that's what's amazing about accumulating wealth, and not even just wealth, influence. Because you remember Karate Kid, the wax on, wax
Of
off.
course.
So one of my frustrations with Elon Musk is like he's got all this energy and attention on him, and I never see him do like the Karate Kid, like just like redistribute it, right? So everyone's focusing on you. If he were to get on an airplane and go to a portion of the world, he has the ability to shine a light on someone who's been subjugated or human suffering. And I'm like, what a waste of his platform. And I think in so many ways, it's just incredible, right? Thomas Edison of our time. So long way of saying, I like to use my platform to shine a light, right? And so Autism Speaks, I've been on the board for, I don't know, almost a decade probably. I really care a lot about disability and working with people who have special needs and whatever that may mean. And so that's one. I'm very passionate about Team USA and the military. I have a business that works around the military, but I work with a group called 51 Vets, and their mission is to help special operators transition from the elite special forces to civilian jobs. So love being around that. And then I've done incredible work with Pope Francis. I'm not a particularly great Catholic, but I grew up Catholic, and I always love the fact that the Roman Catholic Church has the deepest supply lines in the world. They've been around a couple of thousand years, so they operate in far-flung places dealing with tremendous suffering. And so I helped raise money for a group called the Global Solidarity Fund in partnership with the Vatican that supports migrants and refugees around the world. So those are just three. Human rights matters a lot to me, probably because of I witnessed such powerlessness as a kid. So I think if you could do one little thing to unlock freedom in another human being, it's amazing.
So before we wrap up, what's the best way, Matt, to stay engaged with you? And is there anything else about your newly launched book or other causes you're involved with you want to share with us?
No, thanks. Well, so here's my book, Burn the Boats. It's been out a few months. Just was a Wall Street Journal bestseller. So the best way to get in touch with me is LinkedIn or Instagram. If you read the book and the book affects you in some way, DM me, because that simple DM sustains me. I read every one of them and propels me. But my last word on the book, like, it's not possible to read it and not have the book make you want to run through a wall, not on behalf of your boss, but on behalf of your nascent dream that you have ignored for too long. So you will read it and you will say, shit, I can do this and I should do this. And now I feel a little more equipped to do it. And if that happens to you, please let me know. If you don't like it, don't let me know. I'm too fragile at this point to take real feedback. I'm just kidding, sort of. But that is the most important thing I got going on in my life right now is the book, Burn the Boats.
All right, let's wrap up with our 3 questions. Are you ready?
I'm ready.
Okay. In our studio in Laguna Beach, Matt, we have a couch. And I would say, Matt, get on the couch, lay down, kick up your feet, close your eyes. How old are you now?
I'm 48.
You're a young 48. So you're young 48, go back to when you were 16 years old, scraping gum from tables at McDonald's and everything else you've been through and all the life experiences. Today, you're speaking to yourself at 16 years old. What are you sharing with yourself to get you to this point that you can go back and share some wisdom?
Well, I'm going to keep it very simple. I would tell that 16-year-old version, nobody cares. You are obsessed with thinking that you're being judged, and you constantly thinking you're being judged is making you self-censor who you are, your ambition. You are putting yourself inadvertently in a box that grows smaller by the day. But when you get further into the journey, when life brings you to your knees, when you go through divorce and you get cancer and you get your testicle cut off and you've been through everything, you're going to realize, hey, nobody really cares because I don't care. I don't spend my time judging other people. And that is unfortunately something that everybody can relate to. Anybody our age, Ben, and anybody listen to this is like, yep, nobody cares. If you know that the sooner you realize that as a young person, the more that you can operate upon instinct and pursue your true joy rather than self-censoring yourself.
Oh, I love that. Well said.
Thank you.
So it's our last day on earth. God forbid it's just me and you, Matt. It's our last meal together. Your choice. What are we eating and what are we drinking?
Oh, great. We're having a iro, street food, ideally from somebody at 2 a.m. that was picked up and maybe even stayed overnight. We had to reheat it. That's definitely greasy as F. And then we're probably, I know it's trite and I should be more evolved, but I'm having some Silver Oak from Napa Valley.
Okay. Sign me up. I do like the cheeseburger and fries after the marathon.
Yeah.
But that was clever.
Yeah, exactly.
So in our studio, we have a black door. Okay. And you're sitting with me. In our studio, Matt, we have a grand piano, we have a drum set, and we have 6 electric and acoustical guitars. If you're sitting with me in studio and you can select any band or musician, they could be living or deceased, to walk through that black door and play us a song, your choice. Who's walking through that black door and what song are they playing us?
I'm going to do the first one that came to my mind. It's Alphaville. It's Forever Young. Let's dance in style. Let's dance for a while. Heaven can wait. We're only watching. It's very melancholy, but it's transcendent. And it just speaks to sort of sometimes the confusion around the sadness of the human condition and this idea of forever young. So I'm probably playing Forever Young. And then you're going to get very depressed.
Yeah.
I should have said you too or something like that, but I said Forever Young.
Well, Matt Higgins, thank you so much for joining us today. What a pleasure. And hopefully everyone out there got a lot of great knowledge dropped on today. If you are interested in listening to more episodes of the Ben Reinberg I Own It show, kick that right-hand button and click subscribe. Please click the like button as much as possible, especially with this episode with Matt Higgins. And as I say, let it go viral. To follow me, go to benreinberg.com. You can follow me on all the different social media platforms. And yes, kids, I am on TikTok as well. To follow my company, go to alliancecgc.com. We are the leaders in commercial real estate investing in the United States. Feel free to invest with us if you're a credit investor and click on our brand new fund, the Alliance Medical Property Fund. We are the leaders in the United States investing in medical office and veterinarian office properties. We'll show you how to build wealth for you and your family and create a legacy. Matt Higgins, thank you so much for joining us. It was great seeing you.
Thanks for having me. Bye, everybody. Burn the boats.